Hey everybody, Greg Needell here from Rev Robotics.
With Mac. How you guys doing?
With Mac. Happy kickoff to everybody. You know, this is one of the most exciting days of the year for our FTC community, and we are just as excited to be here with it, with you on today. So this show is something that we do every year. This is our 4th year of the show, and what we like to do on day one of kickoff is do our game breakdown. So Mac and I have been mentors for a long time. We know a lot of you don't have access to the game pieces today. You don't have access to the goals. Maybe your teams are only meeting virtually. So we're going to do a little bit of game breakdown, just kind of doing some first take thoughts. Our goal is not to take away the aha of your team. There's going to be tons of discoveries about this amazing game that are going to happen over the coming months as the season goes on. This is just to give you a couple ideas to jump off from, maybe to start some conversations from your internal teams, and then use anything that we show you to kind of just leapfrog your season just a little bit. So for the next hour or so, we're going to just do a game breakdown. We're going to talk about some of the early decisions, and then after we go off camera live, we're going to be doing some prototyping, building some things. We're going to shoot a bunch of small videos on just things we're going to try and experiment, and maybe we'll share with you the results. We're going to share with you the results of those experiments so that you can take them and learn from them. Our chat is live. We've got a couple other Rev folk monitoring the chat, so if you've got questions or anything you want us to address, feel free to type it in the chat and we'll try to get to it. The other thing that's a really big important disclaimer is, we got these game rules several hours ago, the same time that you did, and so we really are doing a quick read through. So make sure if there's rules, questions, or things, refer to the game manuals, and then if there are any questions or clarifications, because I suspect that we're going to have some questions about things as well. Yep. We're going to post in the forums. Wait for First to make an official thing. While Rev is a really close partner to First, we are not the rules experts on this. So bear with us on that. We're just going to be going forward from there. So without further ado, so Mac, ultimate goal, what do you think?
So first take is that it's something that's a little bit new for FTC especially, right? Like we've been seeing a lot of similar game pieces that are played year after year. There have been a number of games where it's been kind of a lot of linear slides or extension mechanisms or arms that you need to use. So potentially launching things like using a flywheel. I think this is the first time that we see like the use of like maybe a catapult or a flywheel or something along those lines since Velocity Vortex, I think was the last time. So it's been a bit that we've done something with that as high flying. It should also be fun to do at home because these things are actually kind of fun and soft. They kind of remind me a little bit of like those disc guns that they had when we were like kids that would fling out and shoot things. So like I could see you running around. Just make sure your dog doesn't get a hold of them. It's probably going to be the big thing when you're if you're meeting virtually with your team.
This is already probably one of my most favorite game pieces I've ever seen in an FTC game. Like I've put my hand on this like today, and I am probably most excited about this piece of any because it is totally different. And I think that totally different is really good from the perspective of it's a totally brand new challenge. The only thing I could think that would be close is like maybe going back to like 2013 FRC game would be the last, like that was a Frisbee game.
Yeah, that would be the closest.
But even living through that game, there wasn't almost any reference for that game. So you're kind of totally new here. Yeah. And I love that challenge. Part of that's because I've been involved for so long, so seeing something new. But I think that, especially in FTC where there's a lot of teams maybe reuse drivetrains or intakes or things year to year when you see the same game pieces of like the cubes or the blocks or the balls, having something totally new means that like there's tons of undiscovered amazingness that you can kind of come up with here. So yeah, I love this.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I actually really like is that the game piece is actually compliant. Like this is something new. Having it where there is a little bit of this give, because one of the things that's really challenging, especially for new teams when you're getting started, is building it where like your actual mechanism is the part that has the compliance built in. Where now, since it's in the game piece, it can be potentially a little forgiving in that regard. But the other thing that like kind of scares me a little bit is that since it does have this compliance, and it seems like it's made out of like a foam material, would be my guess of some sort. What it is specifically, I'm not aware of it. But I would be concerned that like you could get this like trapped in some weird places. So like it's gonna be like a game of inches to some degree, where you're gonna have to play with how things are gonna integrate together, how your different subsystems are working, and making sure that these don't get into small crevices and small spaces where they're going to get gumming up, drivetrains, right? Like that's been a staple for teams, is like just being able to, you have a flat field.
Exactly.
You have a flat field, you might be able to fly everywhere, but what if one of these things gets caught up in a wheel? Like, can this get caught up in a wheel? Like,
we're gonna find out.
We're gonna find out.
We're gonna find out.
There's a lot of testing. So
but I love this game piece. Also, so the Wobble Goals. This is a new element too. Like.
Yeah, it just seems like it wants to keep going too. The one really kind of cool thing about the Wobble Goal too, though, is like it actually doesn't take that much to really lift it. Yeah. Like it's not like this really isn't. This cap seems to be able to stay on here with the weight. So this is real. It's really three or four pieces really. So there's the bottom base. There's a cover on that base. I think this is like it's nominally a 1 inch. It's a little bit bigger than 1 inch. It's basically 1 inch.
This I think that the post of this is the same diameter and maybe material as like the bars last year from the bridge.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that that's a good kind of reference. But it feels like a PEX or a PVC tube. I think that I'm sure that many of you will be getting your goals very soon. But I mean. We'll get a scale out here and do some weights in a little tiny bit to kind of look at that. But, what else? Let's talk about the game. So, first of all, shooting game, that's always really fun. It's a cycling shooting game.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So that's going to be a really, really interesting part of this game. And I think, looking back at some of the things like Velocity Vortex, where it's, you're going to have these phases of the game, right? So obviously autonomous is a big deal, and autonomous is always a big deal, and we'll get into a points breakdown here in just a second. But, autonomous is always big, but then once autonomous has happened, it really becomes cycle, end game. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how the scores balance out and how many cycles you're able to do. Anytime you have a cycling game, it's a game of efficiency, right? How quickly can you pick up the item? How quickly can you score that item? How quickly can you? That's almost a tongue twister. But how quickly can you get it again and do it? And with the high goal, for as an example, in regular teleop being worth six points. One extra cycle could be the difference maker between winning and losing a match.
Yeah, and especially where there is going to be a little bit of the element of your human player is the one that is feeding back into the gameplay the rings that you score in your high or low goal, but the mid goal is dependent upon your opposing teams, the opposing alliance in a traditional event. In your own event, like if you're doing a remote event, it's a little bit different in that balance. But for the traditional events, that kind of plays a little bit in here too, where you start to see potentially maybe some overload strategies come out of how do you want to deal with overloading the other human player to force them to drop more discs out onto the field if your human player is a little bit more loaded up, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's some interesting
your
dynamics in there.
Human player is a really interesting thing to talk about because, human players, in the last several FTC games have been, like look at last year for a second, right? Like last year was very much like, I have a stockpile of blocks, right? I put a block out, robot comes and gets the block, I put another block out, right? I can't recall when the last time there was like an in and out part of, I don't know if there's ever been.
I don't think for FTC.
An in and out part. I know in FRC we've done this type of game before. Actually, this current year's game, right?
Infinite Recharge.
Yeah. Infinite Recharge is a great example of a recycling type game. But human player training is going to be, you talk about those cycle times, right? Yeah. How quickly are you going to be able to pick up one of the rings, put the ring back in the field, respond to what's happening? Mm-hmm. doing things like remembering to reset the
hot shots,
between Auton and the end game. There's a lot to manage there. So I think human player training is going to be a really big important thing. So that'll be interesting.
And also it'll be interesting to see if human players through their training, right, you can get some potential spin or something else that's on the disc, because when it is feeding, it's dropping down at a pretty rapid rate. We've had luckily we've been able to have a field and some of the field elements here at Rev, thanks to First in Texas. But we've been able to throw a couple of those through the chute, and man, do they seem to go a little bit when you're just dropping them in. So there might be some backspin techniques. Who knows?
Yeah, we don't know.
They're going to come up with.
I mean, I can remember like the 2017 FRC game. Like human players would come up with all sorts of techniques for putting those back in. So we'll see. I mean, a lot of that's going to be elevating as the season goes on. I guess one of the other things I want to talk about is the difference between, we've talked a little bit about general gameplay. How do we think the difference in gameplay will be between traditional events and remote events?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the really big things that, even for both events, right, to consider is that ranking points basically are gone. It no longer matters if you win, lose, or draw. It's all about points. You just got to keep scoring as many as you can, as quickly as you can, and not really worry about the outcome of any of your matches, right? So even if you are in a live event, that's one thing to kind of take into consideration. And I know like this was something that we were talking about a little bit off air, is it's going to be a heck of a lot different game when you're playing, basically it's you against the goal, right, versus you playing with 3 other people. It's going to be like, I know in Forrest Gump, right, you have like the ping pong table where Forrest is playing against the wall, right, and it's one thing, but then when you go up against everybody else, it's like you're entering in this other element where the behavior is going to be a little bit different, and especially when you're transitioning from the remote event to a traditional event. You might have something that you need to change in between.
I was even thinking, so I mean, the remote events are going to be almost like skill seminars, right? Like, the practice. And, in those events, like, and we've all been on teams, we've all seen this stuff, right? I mean, where you don't have, to worry about who your alliance partner is, right? You don't have to worry about your match pairings, like, oh, I'm going up against that crazy team.
Yeah.
Like, it is literally a really, really cool element to this year, because you're able to showcase your ability, right? It's your driver ability, not, oh man, this other team's playing defense on me really hard and I can't hit it. I mean, there's actually, like, I know that there's like everybody, myself included, is missing until the point that we have those in-person events again. But I'll tell you, like, there's a part of me that's like really darn excited about these remote events, just from the pure, like, these are the skills, this is the robot that the team built, I'm going to do it, and we're going to show like the absolute best, put on a show, right? Show us what you are. I mean, I actually suspect that you're going to see scores significantly higher at remote events than you will real events, or not real, or in-person events, right? I want to use the right terminology. Yeah. And it really just all have to do with the fact that there's not going to be defense. That means that when you start recycling these back into the field, right? You drop them through the collector and they roll out onto the field, right? If you're a human player or your team can constantly like know where they're going to roll, maybe you don't have to chase them as much as you would in the in-person events, the traditional events. I have more. It's.
And you're also not fighting. You're also not fighting for the limited quantity of them, right? Like you have 10 of them.
Yeah, you've got 10, so you can go from like shoot, and there could already be 3 more, or 4 more sitting on the field. And so if you get into that like loop time of the right timing, could be the difference maker. So I'm really excited. I actually have this other suspicion that teams that go through remote events are going to be much higher performing at traditional events, because they're going to be so much more practiced.
Yeah, they'll have that repetition that's going in beforehand to make sure that they're able to do that. Also, they might have a little bit different strategies too. Like if you're building for a traditional event, right? If you know that you have those 10 that are coming to you and your human player is just feeding them through while they're basically in the air, right? maybe you're talking about a layout of a robot where an intake is on one side and you're shooting on the other side. Maybe it's not on the same side of the robot. Like these are some strategy things that end up coming into play when we start talking about the breakdown.
It's going to be pretty interesting. So do we have any questions from the chat yet that we want to do, or do we want to jump right into the game?
So there are a number of questions that we have about things like that. So I think we're going to highlight the power shots and some of that a little bit later, because we do have a field that is set up out in our warehouse, as well as we have a goal that's over here. So
there's a goal behind Max.
Yeah, there's a goal right
Max
back
blocking
here.
the goal.
So we can take a look at that a little bit.
Mac is an illegal robot.
He's
blocking shots to the goal.
Yeah, and the really big thing is like a lot of it has been like around the game piece itself, and this is we highlighted this earlier, but it is a very malleable game piece. It is made out of
I think it's my guess is that this is polyurethane, like skinned foam. So if you have like a foam basketball or a foam volleyball, or maybe one of those like hand stress balls, that's what this is, right? I can't say exactly, like we had no part in manufacturing these. This is all Andy Mark, but it feels like if you picture in your mind some foam sports object, that's what this is. But what I will say is, like, we've been sitting here like squeezing these and playing with them, and they do return back to shape pretty well, right? But you can literally fold this guy into a pretzel. And
and the other thing too is, like, I've been sitting here with like my fingernails and stuff and like trying to mar up the skin. It's actually relatively pretty good. It's actually a pretty good, like kudos to Andy Mark on this game piece. Like, I feel like this is going to be, relatively speaking, is going to be pretty good at not getting marred up inside of mechanisms. So it should and seems to retain shape on these guys.
One of the things that I think we'll do some checking on these, like, as we do. But I mean, I think it's obvious to know that, like, we will probably prototype a shooter today, right? And so I think that my biggest concern about, like, the wear and tear on these is going to be two things. One is going to be, like, if they go through a lot of shooting discs, right? Like, what does that wheel do to this edge? I know that, like, for the 2013 FRC Frisbee, you'd get like black marring on the edges of the discs and things like that. I think the other question would be, like, if this got driven over into like a chain drivetrain or something like that, I could totally see this getting cut up. But, you know, again, it kind of comes down to impact, right? With 20 of these on the field, if one gets messed up,
it's probably not the end.
It's probably not the end of the world. And my guess is that, you know, most of these are like $3, right? So most of these will probably get replaced.
Yeah, more or less. And also your human player is touching them, right? So, like, your human player, like, if there's really one that's gunked up, depending on the rules, like I haven't done a huge digging in to see what the exact human player rules are, right? But your human player is able to kind of look at this and be like, no, that's probably not the one that we're going to throw out right now. We're going to throw out these three.
I think they have to cycle them all back in really quick, right? Yeah, so I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, but I mean, you're going to be able to look. Every team preloads 3, right? So that means that your 4 robots there, you got 12. You got 12 rings that are going to get some degree of, like, inspection before the match, right? I mean, I assume that if somebody's like, this has got a giant gash in it, like, hey, ref, can you, like,
it's going to get
everyone's going to be pretty reasonable on that. And then at your solo events, like, I would imagine you're going to be able to take a look at what's going on and do all that. So,
and one really quick thing actually is we actually have a question where someone is talking about the Rev sponsorships. So before we go through the game breakdown, because this is actually really, really important for those of you that wouldn't have heard. We're giving out 25 grand, right?
$25,000
worth of sponsorships. I believe the application closes this week, coming up on Wednesday, I believe it is.
I think it's Wednesday.
It's either Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So check our website, revrobotics.com/sponsorships. Should be the link.
It should be right on the front page
for that, and it should be on the front page of the website as well. You should be able to just click in and go through to the team sponsorship application. It's for both rookie and veteran teams. So apply to steal a Michelle Long thing. But we're looking for applications for this. And as far as decisions go, once the applications close, we're going to look to get those decisions made as soon as possible. Our internal goal is to get it done before the end of the week. But it's going to be dependent upon how many applications we have. We're really excited about the turnout we've had so far. It's been really good. It's been close to on par to what it was last year. which is awesome. So we're going to be working through as fast as we can to try to get those turned around so we're able to get money into teams' hands to start building stuff.
So Wednesday the 16th. So that's this coming Wednesday is when those applications are going to shut down.
Yep. So that's just about that. But with that, I think it's about time for us to kind of run through and get our game breakdown.
Game breakdown. All right. So there are a lot of different ways to break down games, and what I'll say is there are some great resources online of how to break down the game. This is the method that I use with the teams that I mentor, and it's really all about putting the game in context in ways that you can really make data-driven decisions. And that's really, to me, the crux of any game breakdown is with a game like this where you only have so much time on the field, and doesn't matter whether it's a traditional event or a remote event, you really want to measure in points per second. So I am taking this much time to do this much effort, to do this much scoring, right? And I think that part of that is going to be like, is an object worth manipulating for the points that you can get? So the first thing I always do is I'm going to flip to we're going to bring up the actual rules grid, and then we'll do a couple drawings to break some things down. But to really further explain that points per second thing, like if scoring one of these in the top goal is worth 6 points, right? And that takes you 1 second to do, right? And taking the wobble goal, right, and putting a ring on the wobble goal at the end of the match is worth 5 points each, right? Which one is worth more per second, right? So am I going to be able to do the action of putting this on this goal a fractional percentage faster that it makes the points justified, right? Now, if you have to shoot, if your shooting rate is like 1, 2, 3, and you can take all 3 and go, then yeah, I mean, so points per second is not an absolute measure of like, do this, don't do this, but when you're balancing out what robot you're going to build and what your strategy is going to be as you approach the season, you want to work on things that allow your robot to be the most efficient, and that's what a cycling game like this is all about. I mean, we are not going to tell you during this stream, you need to build this robot. What we're going to do during this stream is kind of present this, work through it a little bit. We will maybe tell you some of the thoughts that we have, but you know, with FTC, because the season is so long, right? You shouldn't be making the decisions on exactly what you're going to build or what your strategy is today, right? You should give yourself time. Your team needs to do a read through of the rules. You need to ask yourself questions. You may even need to wait for some of the clarifications on rules to see whether a certain strategy is legal or not. And then, you know, within the next week or so, 2 weeks, you're going to want to kind of zero in on your strategy, at least for your initial events. We're going to make some jumps today. You know, like we're going to talk about drivetrains in this hour, for example. And part of that's just help kind of facilitate some of the prototyping conversations. But please, you know, take what we're saying as some advice from some seasoned mentors. But look, neither one of us has won every single match we've ever played in, or our teams have not won every single event we've ever gone to. So obviously, there's a lot more interpretation that could be.
Yeah, no, definitely that can get done. That's for sure.
All right. So, like I said, I did a fast read through of these rules. I pulled the traditional event rules. There are 2 PDFs for remote events. The actual game itself does not seem to be that much different. So that's just a asterisk that if there are big differences between the traditional event rules and the remote events, or if you know what your region is doing, you're going to want to kind of focus on that. General gameplay does not change, right? So that's the important thing. So I think I like to start with points, right? I mean, it's the reason to play the game, right? How many points can you get for doing any individual action? So we have I think we'll switch the view here for a second. And we have a table. We'll move some stuff around here.
Get this out of the way.
Big kudos to David, co-founder of Rev. He's back there being our producer, editor for our studio today. So, you know, thumbs up to David. All right. So there's a lot of different rules, right? So I will always go through, but one of the first things I pull up is this. There's this amazing table. It's on page 26 of the manual. David, do we have that screen cap? Perfect, right there. Look at that. So these are the major scores. So let's kind of talk through some of these here for a second. All right. So in the autonomous period, and I'm going to take some notes here. Not a doctor, but I have the handwriting of one, so you'll have to bear with me. So let's talk about autonomous and wobble goals. Okay, so this is a wobble goal, right? And each team can start with one, right?
Every team needs to start.
They need to start with one.
It needs to be either touching your robot or you need to be in complete possession of it. One of the two.
Okay, so that's number one. So like in previous years, let me see if I can get to this view. Perfect. All right, so here's the field overview. You have these 4 wobble goals that start. This is where they nominally start, but it looked like from the game animation that if you wanted to like tomahawk this thing over your head or something, you could probably do it.
You likely can move it around your robot. It's more likely that it's like when the field reset is going to come by, that's where everything would be for a field reset more so than anything else.
All right, so you have this goal here, and you've got these 3 boxes in this for red and the 3 boxes for blue. I'm sorry if you can't see that, but this is page 7 of the game manual. I guess I can actually probably like darken this up at all. Nope, not doing a thing. Awesome. So, so if you take this goal, there's a little tiny stack of rings. Let's start with this. There's a little tiny stack of rings. It can either be no rings, 1 ring, or 4 rings in the middle of the field. And based on, and those are located right here or right here respectively. And based on what that says, tells you which target zone you want to drop your wobble goal into. That's a really cool mechanism that resembles a lot of things from the past, like the visions on the stones last year, or the picking the gold and the silver from Rover Ruckus. So this is a vision-related thing. I have a couple ideas of maybe some ways to detect this that are not computer vision related. I think that maybe you can do like a distance sensor, for example, at least to tell the difference between 4 and none. If you drive to that area, you can probably use a color sensor, or use if you put a color sensor at the height of 4 and the height of 1 and you drove up to it, you can identify whether there's nothing here, but there's something here.
Yep.
You can do some basic logic on that. But back to scoring. So if you complete this task where you get this guy into the proper zone, that is 15 points, right? That's a pretty nice nice chunk. All right. So what else? Robots navigating. So what is navigating, Mac? You got a definition for navigating?
No, I'm looking it up. So the one other thing too within the game manual is whenever there is something that is italicized, typically it means it is a defined term, which is in its own section. So if we go to navigating, which is an autonomous period scoring task where a robot is parked in a specific area.
Right. So that's similar to last year. You've got this launch zone defined by this white line, and so if you're parked over this line, you get those points for navigating.
Correct. So it would be really, really similar to last year with the Skystone Bridge parking underneath there.
Okay.
So you're going to be looking at a similar task along those lines.
Okay. And then, rings scored in tower goal, low, mid, and high. So 3 points for the low, 6 points for the mid, and 12 points for the high goal. All right, so talking through that, I mean, obviously, if every individual ring, right, let's just talk logic here for a second. If every individual ring that you've got is worth 12 points, and moving this goal is worth 15 points, right? And you can preload 3 rings, right? So within Auton, your highest scoring potential is going to be shooting these rings. Now, there's 2 different things you can shoot these rings with, right? You can shoot them in the goal, where they're worth the high goal, which is worth 12 points apiece. Or it says here you can shoot them in power shots for 15 points apiece.
Yeah, onto those targets, which are going to be a little bit of a challenge to hit. You're not going to be able to see it behind me.
Could we pick up the goal and move it right
see
there?
if you can actually move this goal.
Let's see if we can do this live. This is the fun of live, everybody.
So we can move that over here. But if we kind of drag this guy over here. So you have this power shot.
There we go. So these little guys right here, these are the power shots. And so you get 15 points in Auton if you hit this and tip it from the forward to the back position.
Yeah, but if you take one of those rings and put it in between the 2
Yeah, so this is the tricky part, right?
Like that is
See
not
that?
is not a lot of room for error.
That is a thing.
So you might be able to get a situation where you can pick up 1 or more of those on this goal, but likelihood you're going to be looking at trying to hit one of them. It kind of reminds me of that carnival game where you have the clowns.
Yeah,
you need to hit with the ball. I was never very good at that, but it seems like it's a carnival game type style that you're looking for. So that is going to be a little bit of a challenge, and at least with the high goal and also with the low goal, not only do you have that Euphoria target that's on the bottom, but you also have all this blue.
Well, you have the blue and you have a logo there.
Yeah, you have the blue and you have the logo. So there might be some other things that you're able to key off of by using some sort of vision, whether it's Euphoria or something else, and going that route.
You know, I can tell you right now, I know what the kids on our teams are going to do. They're going to put mentor faces on those power shot little posts.
Yeah, more than likely.
That's how mentors. This is how you encourage your students to go for those little power shots. You get little tiny photos of your face, and then it's just like bam every single time.
Yep. But so those power shots, and like it's only a benefit of 3 points during the autonomous phase, and the scale of difficulty there is going to be much, much higher. This is a much larger goal mouth if you're shooting high than it is for, you're probably looking at the disc itself is 5 inches, and the diameter of the pipe is about 1 inch itself. So you're probably looking about.
So I'll do that again real quick. So the height of this top goal, you can literally fit one of these discs in, like in this orientation, right? Like straight over the top.
Yep.
I mean, that is a huge goal relative in scale to this. We haven't tested our shooters or anything, but here, let's do that. Let's do that visual for everybody, because I think this is going to be kind of a good one. But
so this is that's 6, 7.
That's 7. So when you're shooting a ring, right? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means you've got a specific tolerance of the height of this disc of 3 rings on either side to hit this goal, right? So these are 3/4 of an inch tall. So you have 3/4, 1.25. So you have 3 inches, right?
Yeah.
Or two and
a bit.
2 and a bit, yeah, 2 and a bit. The math on camera. Let's not do that.
But the really big thing too is it's just to know that you're basically looking at a lot of space and a lot of give in this whole thing. It is a fairly large slot that you're able to kind of feed these into. Where with the other thing, it seems to be quite much more difficult. While you might be able to utilize the same mechanism. So, it's going to be just much more challenging.
And ultimately, I think that this is where I like to get to next. Getting back to the rules and breaking down this game a little bit. You really have to think about that. What scoring things do you need to build a specific mechanism for, right? Because if you have a mechanism that can shoot this disc, right, and let's say that you focus on shooting this disc in this high goal, that mechanism aimed slightly differently can probably knock down one of those pegs.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
They're a little bit lower, so I'm not sure how that works. Maybe you vary the speed of the wheel, or you shoot from further away,
or if you change where the pylon on a catapult is, or something.
So there are things, but generally speaking, you have figured out how to get a ring, shoot a ring.
Yep.
Both of those are within a thing. You're not going to actually have to make that choice right now. I mean, I think that one of the things that I want to get to during our prototyping, is I think we're going to try to build a quick shooter prototype. I want to be able to like throw like all the rings through it, right? Like from a fixed position up against a wall, and I want to see like what's the variance, XY variance of like how consistent is a janky shooter. Like let's be clear. Anything that we prototype today is going to be a little bit jank,
yeah,
right?
It'll be a little quick.
But it, you know, we'll learn a lot from it. Hopefully, you'll learn from it too. All right, so that's autonomous, right? That's all the scoring autonomous.
Yep.
All right. So so let's go on to driver control. So if you look at that center driver control section on the screen, like you'll notice there's only one thing you're doing during driver control. You are just scoring rings.
Yep.
That is it, right? So low, medium, high, 2, 4, 6. I mean, straight up multiplier for
difficulty
for
depending
the
on
difficulty
height.
On the height. You know, one of the things that I noticed when I was looking at the drawings, and let me see if I can bring this up for you, is I wanted to point out how sneaky that middle goal is. So that middle goal, so much paper. All right, here we go.
So now this is going to be probably for traditional events, but
well, it's the same thing, right? So it's the middle goal is sneaky, right? So if you're blue and you're shooting in the top goal and you miss low,
yep,
you're giving points to the Red Alliance. Now, in a remote event, I don't want to.
I believe the middle one in a remote event is still yours.
Is that right?
I think they basically skin the one side where it's just all blue instead of it being blue, red, blue.
Right. Like I said, I didn't dig too much into the remote event rules, so why don't, maybe Mac, you want to take a look at that real quick. But at a traditional event, you've got to be real accurate because scoring in the high or the mid, like you know, the swing here. I mean, I always look at point differentials. Like that is one of the key things that I focus in on is like you get 6 points in that middle goal, that's great. You miss and go low, you're giving 4 points to your opponent. So you've got this 10-point swing of 6 to positive to 4 to negative. So being pretty accurate in that top goal, if that's what you elect to go for, is going to be key. But you know, based on these points, are you going to be able to score in the lower goal 3 times as fast as the high goal? I mean, that is the way that I break down points per second. That doesn't mean that you have to score in the high goal. That just means that you need to consider that a robot going for the high goal versus a low goal has to do a lot less effort in the match for the same score. An example about this also is from an accuracy perspective. Since you have that ×3 effect from the high goal to the low goal, I read that to be as like that means as long as I can shoot above a 33% chance in that top goal, I know that I'm probably doing okay. Now that math might change just a little tiny bit if I'm missing shots low and giving the other team points. But if it is all skinned at the remote event, you kind of almost want to let them rip and just see what happens.
Yeah, more than likely. Like I haven't been able to find the exact section, but there seems to be a few folks in chat who might have. So it seems like that is the way. We'll continue to dig through this to try to see if there is a difference there. But the mid goal or the high goal. The other big thing too is it's not just are you going to be able to do the high goal or the mid goal 3 times faster than the high goal, but are you going to be able to do another robot action that will derive that much
extra points.
Those extra points. So since the middle of the game itself seems to be, it is all just score, 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 score. And with the way that ranking and everything else is done, where it's based on score, 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 likely you're not going to be doing something like playing, you're probably not playing too much defense, even at a traditional event. Because of that, until you get into
But what I will say though, and so here's the X factor, right? And there's always, see, the GDC does a great job of this, where there's always an end. There's always a thing, right? It's never as clear of that thing. So, you know, when we looked at that field drawing, remember this line? Remember that little tiny line right there? So you got to shoot every single one of your shots for the mid and the high goal from behind that line. So that's what, a 2 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot shot, greater than 5 feet. That low goal, you can dump.
Yeah, you can just
You
drive
can
up
go
and
right up
pump.
against that wall. So, you know, I wonder if you could almost like, can you like catch right out of the chute and just,
It has to hit the floor.
I don't know, does it have to hit the floor?
Yeah, like I think it's like G12 or G6 or something like that. It has to hit the floor, but it just has to hit the floor. So could you create something where you're quick enough?
could you like I mean, this is the question, right? In order to score in that top goal, if you need to collect three rings, drive behind that line, right? Shoot those shots, right? What is that total duration of time? And I have no idea. I have no idea. But the question is like, if literally here comes the ring out of the chute, it goes, hits the ground, you pick it up and go right into the lower goal.
Yep.
Could you potentially could do that faster,
fairly quickly.
So I'm not ruling out low goals yet. I mean, I know that teams the coolest thing to build is always the most exciting, which is generally going to be the shooter. And,
Yeah.
you know, with the power shots and with some of this other stuff, it's clear that this is a shooting game. I mean, there is an entire net on the edge of one field. Like they expect people to be throwing these things.
Yes.
But don't rule out low goal strategies yet. That's a good segue to saying like build within your resources too, right? You're going to have a much better experience attacking a single element or two elements of this game and doing it within what you can do, rather than trying to compete and worry about what, you know, the teams at the very, very top who've been doing this for a dozen years are doing, because sometimes it's just not achievable, right?
Yeah, and especially depending upon what resources you have within your own shop, and especially this year when there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to be working virtually.
Yep.
You know, the really big thing is like, and I think this is going to be a huge challenge with like autonomous modes this year, right? Is how are you going to be able to? They have there's a randomized piece on the field with being able to drop the wobble goal, but there's also how are you going to come up with a really, really dead simple, repeatable autonomous mode that's able to maximize the amount of points when you might not physically have the robot, right? Like there's going to be some of this challenges where teams are going to need to work through and being able to do this communication on that end. But anyway, we should probably just wrap up.
Let's keep going because we're using some time. All right, so endgame. Endgame is where things get really interesting. Obviously, like the wobble goals. Wobble goals, to give a nice analogy, I kind of think that they're similar to like the foundation from last year's game, where if you move them into a specific spot during autonomous, you get points. And then if they made it to that spot during the match, and then you move them to another spot, you get more points, right? So it's a very like mobile thing with a couple of X factors, right? So first of all, if you take this at the end of the match and you move it to the starting line, back to the starting line, it's 5 points, right? But if you can move it to the drop zone, you get 20 points. The drop zone is outside the field. So we're like relic recovery here, where you're going to put that goal outside the field, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and the nice thing, at least with relic recovery, right, is you wanted to have it where the relic was either
standing up or
laying down, and it needed to be in 1 or 2 or 3, and it needed to be completely contained. You don't need to worry about this not standing up. It will probably stand itself back up.
I mean, I can tell you, teams wish that the relic moved like this that year, right? It's like,
that's
hold on, let me put this thing down like that. Oh no, I'll stand it up.
So hopefully we'll be able to look at that to get that kind of.
And then power shots. So power shots are back again, Max. So how does that work? So it looks like you can hit these power shots in both auton and after, but there's a reset.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So there is a trigger over on the back which allows your human player to reset it after the autonomous.
So you can get those 45 points in auton and then get another 45 during the end game.
Yep.
So if you did nothing but focus on the power shot, you can get 90 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big brain move right there.
Yeah, that's a lot of points there, and you're looking at, since if you're getting 6 in that upper goal, you're looking at that's a couple of cycles at least. I mean, worth of points during the normal teleoperated play. So,
but I mean, just talking about like what you can do, right? Like you start the match with 3 preloaded, right? So you talk about like strategy, right? So let's say you don't have a super fast intake, right? Let's say that, but you can take those, you can get the 3 at the beginning. If you shot those 3 accurately, you knock those down, you can spend the rest of the time during the match picking up 3 more, getting them set, getting the right position, and you knock down those last 3 during endgame. That's a big point contribution. I mean, these scores are going to be huge.
Yep, and that's also a really good place, like especially if you're a team where maybe you didn't get the intake and maybe like indexing or getting things to your shooter or to your catapult or to whatever was a little bit of a challenge. But once they get there, everything is gravy. That could potentially be a really good bonus for at the traditional events to be a part of an alliance. So that's something that's kind of something to keep in mind as we're kind of going on from there.
Okay. And then lastly, lastly, rings on the Wobble Goals.
Yeah, getting 5 points for.
So this was one that when we saw this, when we first read the rules, I'm not sure how this is going to play out yet. Like, this is of all the things in the game, I don't know why you'd exactly do this. But you get 5 points in the end game for each ring that goes on this goal, right? But it seems like you can't put rings on the goal before the end game.
Yeah, it's only during the last 30 seconds of the match.
So it's kind of like this one, and this is just my opinion, right? But with it being worth less than a high goal, it's kind of like if you can manipulate these effectively, you probably just keep putting them into the main goal. But if you build an arm, if you're a dumper into the low goal, for example, and that goal can reach, up here, maybe that changes your end game strategy, where instead of putting them in the low goal, you put them here. So
yeah,
the
other benefit is once they're on top of that goal, they're no longer in play, right?
Right. So your opponent can't take these off, right?
Yep, they can't de-score anything. So once they're on there, they're out of the match basically. So the benefit of that point value would likely be if you were building like a dump truck, or you were building something to go into that low goal, going ahead and placing them onto that wobble goal to get the bonus points. Plus, you end up removing them from play, which then makes it where that last 30 seconds is not just a cycle fest for high goals, mid goal, low goal, et cetera, as we're kind of going from there.
Okay. All right. So let's. So that's the point score. So if you look at this chart, one of the things that becomes really obvious to me is that autonomous has the most opportunities to score. So I want to talk a little bit about. So you'll notice that we're talking a lot about the points, and we're talking a lot about like how to score in this game. We haven't actually started talking about the mechanism side. It's really easy to jump into the mechanism side, but you got to figure out kind of the what you need to accomplish before you can figure out the how, right? I mean, obviously, if you're like, hey, we need to be able to pick up these many discs and shoot them this fast, and you get to the how stage and you can't do it, you might have to go back and revisit your strategy. But you got to figure out the what before you can figure out the how. So I want to talk a little bit about autonomous strategy, and then I think we'll transition to just like a quick little brainstorm and some sketching about
how we're kind of like maybe what we want to tackle first.
Yeah, what we're going to try to build.
What we're going to break out and do once we hop off.
All right, so this is Greg's bad drawing 101 here. All right, so I'm just going to use half this field because first of all, it'll allow me to draw it 2 times, and I'm using Sharpie. But I think kind of drawing out a couple strategies, at least to kind of get us going. So you start with three rings, right? And you start with one of these goals, right? All right. What other scoring potential do you have in autonomous besides those 3 rings and those goals?
There's the other rings that potentially.
Okay, so over here somewhere there's either 0, 1, or 4 extra rings. So these are bonus rings, right? What else can you do?
And then we have our friends from chat are also saying, don't forget that you can park.
Okay, so you got the park. All right, is that everything?
I believe that's it. That's all we got on the
So there are.
autonomous side here on the.
All right. So you have. So this is the one, but there are 2 goals, right?
Technically, I mean, well, yeah, for the.
Or two wobble goals.
There's 2 wobble goals. Like there's the second one that is technically your alliance part.
Right.
So you would have there is a second wobble goal that is on the.
Okay. So here's your top goal over here, right? Here's the little power shot things. Not to scale, everybody. But all right. So let's just do basic strategy here, okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say right now, laying down the gauntlet. 100% of teams should be able to park on that line, right? Mm-hmm. All right. There's a 12-foot field. You got 5 feet back, so you need to drive 7 feet forward.
And all your motors have encoders that are built into
there is not a legal motor in FTC that does not have an encoder built into it, and you will be able to drive to that line.
Yeah.
Right. So all right. So everybody's going to get park, right? One other thing about parking. So something that came out last year's game was like the tape measure mechanisms or the extender.
The Houdini ones.
Yeah. So I think those rules are written about the same, where it's just you've got to just be crossing that.
Yeah, you just need to be straddling the line from at least what the initial read is. That's probably a good question for the keeper.
So that's a good one. Is like so depending on where you are on the field, you might be able to extend something.
So just get a 7-foot tape measure.
Everybody, come on! Everybody gets those 5 points. Let's go. All right. So the nice part, I really, really love that the GDC made it so that you can hold on to this before the match starts. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that this object is I'm going to use this one. This object's really cool, but it's also would be a little bit challenging to grab, because the minute you touch it, it's going to want to move. Mm-hmm. So the nice part is that if you had a hook, or you had
you have an integrated hook, or you have something
that's on your robot, right? Yeah. Or maybe a little shelf,
or
right?
Yeah.
Or anything. Like it feels like a simple mechanism that you can do that, and as long as you can drop it.
Yeah, as long as you could drop it in. Like I could see someone coming up with just like a simple fork with like a fork on a servo that helps to kind of lift it up like this, and then you could just deploy the servo.
So that'll be cool.
Like that would be easy enough.
And then let's talk about shooting. Okay, because shooting, this is the thing that stuck out to me a lot from my previous years, especially on FRC shooting games. The highest shot, the most highest accurate shot you get is the first shot that you take before your robot moves an inch.
Yep.
Right? Like, so one of the things that I would say just from a straight up autonomous strategy is that if your robot can start here, right, and it has to be straddling
the line,
part of this line, right, there needs to be a wheel or a zip tie or something across this line, you've got this really straight shot, right? So this is a 12-foot. This is where I was going to go with this. So where are my marks? Okay. So you have robot, you have wall, you have goal, this, and you have a floor. This distance is 12 feet. What is to the top goal, to the bottom of it, this is 33 inches. The top of this is an extra 5 inches, so 38. And this is to the very top. So let's just say we shoot right to the middle, and let's say you shoot, from a couple inches down from 18, right? So you've got a nice little parabola there. But for all intensive purposes, so you got to kind of figure out some of this trig, right? Like at what angle?
What angle does that shot need?
Do these things, do they go in a?
What's the arc of the shot?
In a parabola, like are you trying to put it all where the parabola is like essentially like that, where it's like through the back of the goal, or like parabolic motion? There's gonna be a thing. There's a lot of really cool parabolic motion calculators online. We'll probably link to it. We'll find a couple and link to them, on our doc site. One of the things we're going to do is our new documentation website, docs.revrobotics.com. we're going to put a little section in there about this prototyping build. And so what we'll do is we'll write up a couple things. We'll post links to like this is the scoring. We're going to create a bunch of smaller videos about
individual prototypes
we build with a couple little diagrams. But if we talk about parabolic, we'll write a little article about parabolic motion, things like that. So we'll get that stuff up. Probably most of it will come up in the early part of next week. But my point here is that talking about autonomous strategy, I will tell you right now, one of the first things that every team needs to prototype if you're planning on shooting for that high shot is how far you can shoot this disc with any accuracy. Right? It's not about like, maybe you build a shooter that's shoot at 50 feet, no one cares. But if that's 50 feet and then you got to go left or right 20. But if you can shoot a shot that's 12 feet with accuracy equal to the size of the goal, I mean, those first 3 shots are taken without your robot moving.
Yep. And then you can guarantee that you're going to be getting 36 points.
Yeah.
Right off the jump, and then it doesn't matter.
41 points because everyone's going to park.
Oh right. Well, in 41,
everyone,
then you go park.
Everyone's going to park, right?
And then you get 41. So I think that's kind of the big thing to be thinking there. And then the other thing as well is that then this makes it where it is not dependent upon any other system within your robot, right? So like even if like you're midway through your year and you're still having difficulty being able to pick these up off the floor and getting them to your shooter, at least at the beginning of the match, if you have that dialed in, you'll be able to produce a good chunk of points.
Yes, that's even without an intake, right? Like no intake.
No intake.
Right? First event roll up with a robot that shoots 3 for 3.
Yep, that shoots 3 for 3.
3 for 3 and moves this thing and parks like.
Now you're talking.
That's the points.
You're getting close to 100 points already without having to do much else.
Yeah.
And that could potentially win a lot of traditional events and would potentially put you in a pretty decent scoring position even within the remote one.
Yeah, we'll see. So that's one of my things, right? Would be like, can you shoot that shot stationary? And I don't know, right? Like I don't know how great these fly yet. I mean, hopefully within the next couple of hours we'll find out. We'll figure that out. And what we're going to do is we're going to post some of those videos to YouTube as they come out, but maybe some like Facebook and Instagram and some of that stuff. So follow all the socials, like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the things. So Auton strategy would be going from a list here, right? So I would say like number 1, if I was a team, would be like shoot 3 shots. Shoot 3, right?
Yep.
Okay. So what about these extra discs, right? So I guess number 2, and maybe this can be before, this would be like identify, like wobble location.
Yeah, you can ID location. The other thing as well that you could do too, right, is you could even play a game where you're doing some guess and check, right? Like even if you don't get everything dialed in, right? Early on, especially, if you know that there's something there versus there's not something there, right? If you know there's not something there, then you go exactly right to the 0 point. And if you think that there's something there, you can take a guess and be like, oh, well, I think it's 1.
Yeah.
Like,
you could play the stat version of this, right? Where like there's only 3 options, right? So if you don't even pay attention to that at all, 30% of the time you're going to get it right.
Yeah.
Right? Just doing nothing. But if you literally okay, so let's talk about sensors. So if you put maybe we should try this. If you put like one of the 2-meter distance sensors, little LiDAR sensors on your robot, and you shot it out there, that thing's got a really narrow beam top to bottom, right?
It's going to depend on the full distance, because like when you're looking at the 1.5 meter, because inside of the FTC SDK, you're looking at it's about 1.5 meters roughly is what the full distance is, and it's looking for something that's going to be about the height of a piece of paper, right? So you're going to be looking for something that's going to be it's going to be pretty close to what a stack of 4
But look, you got 48 inches, right?
Yeah.
So you're pretty darn close. If that's on the front of your robot, that's 18.
Mm-hmm. And you're driving, especially
and you're driving forward at all, you should be able to detect if there's something there or not.
You should be able to detect if there's something there or not.
If you can tell there's something there or not, then you can easily make a determination, and you'll either hit it exactly. So now you're down to 50%.
And then if you wanted to really get it, if you really wanted to get it in tight, the closer in you get with the distance sensor, the more accurate it becomes.
Yeah.
So and then you're able to get into these really,
but
really
let's
minute
but let's also be
differences.
clear, right? Like there's some really great camera stuff out there.
Yeah.
The pre-trained TensorFlow
Yeah, TensorFlow
stuff
is usually pretty good.
is going to be really good on this, where it should be able to detect the difference between a 4-ring stack, right? If you point a camera at where this is supposed to be, right?
It should, the TensorFlow
It'll
should
know,
be,
wait, I don't detect anything there, and that tells you one thing. I see one, object where I see 4, and I don't know how they have it trained this year.
We'll have to wait for the SDK.
We'll take a look at some of that stuff once the new SDK comes out. But I don't know whether they have this trained as an object and like the stack trained as an object, or they have it trained only on single objects and it can detect
if there's multiple.
if there's drawing a bounding box around each one of those. So we'll have to play with that. But so you detect that, so you identify the goal, and then you can drop, drive,
drop,
and drop.
and then park.
Drop, and 4 is park, right?
And if you need to be able to cut anything out of that, it's probably the identify and drive drop, and it's probably your head.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think that
you can stretch goal it out where
Yeah.
that midsection is a little bit of a stretch.
starting at this moment in time, right? I would say that like this order, shoot, identify, drive, and drop and park, is a really good. Just like you come out of the gate with that, you're way ahead of the game.
Yep.
I have heard and seen some chatter, right? We pay attention to the Discords and the chats and stuff, and we know that people are going to try to pick these up, right? And I know that there's probably a variety of this that is shoot 3, identify the wobble, go pick these up, then shoot those, then go pick this. Once you pick this, maybe if your partner didn't move, come back and get the second one, move the second one, then come back and like, I get it, right? You can always expand upon this stuff. But the nice part about this is that shooting your shots, right? Independent variable, right? Have a robot with a shooter. That's all that's required there, right? Identify, drive and drop. All that requires is a drivetrain with a servo, right? One servo, and you can drop this thing, right? You can drive and drop without identifying. You can drive and drop without shooting, right? You can do all that. So I think that, and everyone's gonna be able to park, right? Say after me. We will all be able to park, right? Okay. So so these 4 elements really create the basis of doing it. If you want to do anything more advanced than this, the next one would be like pick up discs, pick up rings, right? And then the other one would be pick up goal, right? But this is like
there's kind of a really
like see this line here. Well, I'm gonna draw this thing that's called like, okay, this is December 31st. Like make everything below here your Christmas or your Hanukkah present, right? Like like don't start here.
Don't start there,
right? But if you kind of break down to those things, I think you'll be in good shape. That leads me to the next.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into like what types of things we actually should be working on. So these are our overall goals for autonomous. Then that means that we likely need to start figuring out what exactly we're going to start making. So
David, can you drop the scoring summary there for a second? Just the scoring summary off. Perfect.
Thank you.
So I'm going to leave this thing over here, and then I can bring in new paper. So let's talk about things that we want to look at.
So we need to build something that's going to be able to shoot our discs,
Okay,
right?
so shooter, right? Okay, so let's talk about. Do you want to list out the types of things?
Yeah, let's list out the types of things, and then we can kind of
go and iterate on some of this. Okay,
stuff.
so we're gonna try to do a shooter prototype, right? We're gonna need to do this autonomous. Remember, this is all about like trying to be effective at autonomous here.
We're going to need a drivetrain.
Right? We will need a drivetrain. All right, that's fun.
We're likely going to need some sort of mechanism that's going to be able to carry this guy.
So you need a carry / drop for the goals. Right. All right. So that's the requirements, right? I would say the other thing that it's not required for this autonomous list, but I think that it'll be a really big service to a lot of people is if we take a look at a couple intake things.
Yeah, so probably some intaking, and then also likely with that is going to be kind of moving these things around. You know, we kind of mentioned earlier with how pliable these are.
So like a conveyor?
Like a conveyor, an indexer, you know, we're going to need to look for something that's along those lines because this could get a little dicey, a little hairy if you don't happen to have this.
I'm going to draw a line right here because this is kind of, I think, the way that we want to look at this, right? And to be clear, right, you know, I've said it a couple times, we're just going to come up with some prototypes, right? Like, we are not giving you a final solution. We just want to give you some examples of how some of this stuff might work, right? You know, oh, this looks really promising, or like, hey, this was really bad, so
so steer away.
So, or you know, so we're trying to give you some of that, like. And we'll get into prototypes a little bit. So let's take a look at shooters, right? Let's draw a couple different options. I'm going to use the fact, I will say right now, if I'm an FTC team and I'm thinking about shooters, I am Googling 2013 FRC
Ultimate Assist?
Ultimate
or
Ascent. Ultimate Ascent.
Assist was Aerial Assist.
Aerial Assist was the year before. But Ultimate Ascent. Ultimate? Aerial.
No, Aerial Assist, Ultimate Ascent.
Ultimate Goal.
And Ultimate Goal.
Okay,
yes.
Got it. Good.
Anyway.
All right, so I mean, some great teams that year. Obviously, like Team 148, they did a really nice like full court shooter that year. Really long shots with frisbees. A lot of Texas teams, you know.
There were a number of full court shooters where full court ones because with that game the human player station was back on the other side of the field, so like that might be a good inspiration for being
like anybody shooting really long, right?
Long discs.
Some of those. I also think that like you could look at things like some other teams like Team 67, Team 1477, Texas Torque. They won Worlds that year.
Yeah, they had a pretty cool lot.
You know,
there's
there's lots of teams from FRC in 2013. I don't know if this is going to fly like a frisbee.
We're going to find out.
I have no idea. But what I'll say is that shooters in FRC in those years generally fell into three categories. You had a single wheel shooter, right? So whatever the path was, some of them went like arcs around it, some of them went linear, but basically you had a wall on one side and you had a wheel and some type of feeder, whether it was a belt or some sort of kicker or something, but single wheel out the side. So I think this is going to be the easiest to get up and running.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And this is, by the way, the same as like any ball shooting game too. A lot of it is just like going to be a flywheel type of thing over here. The next one that we saw, some of the really long range shooters, if I remember correctly, in 2013, actually did a double wheel on one side. And the reason they did doubles is it's all about acceleration, right? So if you've got all of your equations for parabolic motion prediction all start with V0, right? And so that's your initial velocity, and so or your velocity at time equals 0. And so if you have a single wheel, you're going to fire it up. You're going to go from a slow belt to trying to really accelerate it in a really fast amount of time. With a dual wheel setup, what happens is that you go from your belt. This accelerates it, call it 3/4 of the way up to your final exit velocity, and then the second wheel takes it up the next, and then so the delta made it a lot more consistent, and that's what I remember. So I think we can easily try these two.
Yeah. The other thing too is it gives that top wheel also has less of, since it does less of the motion, right? You're able to keep inertia on that wheel.
You can keep this
easier
one
to keep it spinning.
Yep. The other thing that I'm curious about is also actually like, without knowing how these things fly.
You're gonna need that more in frame.
Oh yeah, I'll just go down here. So without knowing how these things fly, I wonder what a pitching machine might look like. My experience with frisbees is that the spin on the disc, right, or like you throw in a Roby, right, like the spin really is what keeps it stable in the air. Pitching machines, like
They tend to like chuck them.
they
Kinda
chuck
like
them. But when Mac and I first saw these, we both had the same experience thinking about these little like foam shooter things.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of those foam shooters have like the pitching machine
Type tool wheel.
little tool wheels, and 12 feet is not a short distance, but it's also not.
It's not really long.
It's not an FRC game where you're shooting 54 feet, right? Like,
Yep.
So like, right? I mean, if I just try to do like ring toss, right? Like, I mean, so I don't know. So I think these three are the big ones we'll probably focus on. I don't think we're going to try a catapult.
No.
I think catapults might have a place here because these will fit in this goal in like any orientation. I think that's cool. Kudos to anybody who builds a catapult. Well, of course I make it, but we're not going to do that today.
Well, what I'm kind of worried about is it's like depending on the orientation is like, is it going to roll in and then get seated in? Where like, because this has been the big thing, like we mentioned this about spin, is a lot of time with ball games and with disc games and other things along those lines, that spin can also help you win, where like you end up hitting a corner and then it wraps around and through. So we should try to see what's going on there. I don't think we're going to really mess with a catapult. However, the first thing, or like a flicker, like in Velocity Vortex, since it was like a vertical hoop, the flicker kind of made more sense in that type of a game, or a catapult.
It's also because like if you flip these right in any sort of way, they're gonna tumble.
They're gonna
if when you're talking about a ball, even if it's got a turbulent flow, like it's still gonna follow parabolic motion and do this. This will still follow that motion, but the orientation that it's in when it reaches towards the goal. Now, but if you're making a shooter for the mid goal,
it might be easy.
That might be really, really easy. So
take that with a grain of salt.
Take that. We're not doing it. We're not solving every solution for everything here. We're just going to do a couple things. The nice part about this is I think that part of our build system, with the extrusion and like ultraplanetary that you can bolt wheels and stuff right too. I think it'll be really easy to like take one of like our grip wheels or our driving wheels, ultraplanetary bracket extrusion.
Go,
right? So we'll get into a couple 5-minute prototypes, 3-minute prototypes, 30-minute prototypes. Like we'll get into this. So this is what our plan is for the shooter. All right. Let's hold off on talking about drivetrain here for just a second. Carrying and dropping the goals. This is one of those things that like, since you already start with it, like I think we want to make this as simple as possible.
Yeah, I think it's like some sort of
I think like
static drop or something along those lines.
Well, I could see a couple ideas, right? So like you could do some type of like recess like this, where it fits in the cap here, where like I have colors. This is why I have colors. Where like the cap maybe is captured there. Like this is a piece of polycarbonate, right? And then maybe what you do is you just have a servo with an arm that like pushes it out.
Yeah, like you're
right.
Like
so you just out. Like maybe the servo one direction. Like if the servo's in one direction, it's the arm is across here.
It's helping the whole.
And then because the servos are our servo is depending whether it's in it could be 360, but you can do 270 of programming. Depending on how you design this, you could have it lock it in and then also have it push it out.
Yep.
Right. So I think you do something like that. That seems pretty easy. In regards to dropping the goals, I don't know. I mean, we do have a couple linear motion examples that we've done with like our lift kits before.
Yeah.
So if something like this works or some easy way to grab it, maybe we can grab one of our linear motion examples and see if we can
just bolt
something on here so that we can pick them up, move them, maybe get them over that field wall. Let's see where this gets to. I think that simple stuff like this might be the best for teams, and then we'll see if, it's not really on our major list about getting them over the wall at the end, but
it might be easy enough because like if
we might be easy enough. The thing about Rev is that like
we have a bunch of stuff
constantly are building and evolving like our own system, our own products. So we build a lot of lifts and things. So we have this fun stockpile of like, here's a bunch of linear lifts and here's a bunch of drivetrains. And so some of these prototypes are going to be like, let's build the very game specific thing, and then
we'll
let's see if we
on.
can slap that onto something that we made already. And we can always document the thing that we've made already to help, but we're trying to get through ideas right now. We're not trying to give all the solutions, right? So, so that's good. All right, so let's talk about intakes.
Yeah, intakes.
So intakes. Whew.
So you can do, this is kind of going to be dependent on if you're looking at intaking and then shooting, or you're just like looking at intaking and dumping. So I think like a really simple one would be, I'm thinking about like what Frank did last year for the Skystones, was just a little grabby claw guy. So we can come up with some potential way of being able to corral and then just kind of pinch.
Okay. So I get what you're saying. So you're saying like, here's the drivetrain of the robot. This is top down, right? And you do some sort of like V front, so that the rings kind of self-center there.
And then you have some sort of like,
and then you have some dunking bird arm. Everybody, all my Allsparks love the word dunking bird, right?
Yeah.
So what we're saying is maybe some type of arm like that, where like maybe this one goes in and out, right? So like if the ring comes in there, maybe it comes down and it always pinches the
center hole or something.
The center hole, and then maybe this picks up and delivers, or this can maybe put it on top of this goal.
Yeah, potentially.
Or put it in the low goal. So that's a good intake. Actually, depending on, I was thinking maybe if you built this tall, what you could almost do is like you pick one up, right, and you've got this in your grip, and then another one comes into that kind of V funnel in your robot. This one goes back down, you open the claw, then you go down and you pick up again.
Yeah, you
and
just
so
wash,
you can,
rinse, repeat.
So you if you have the ability, you can only carry 3, so like you have like a V, you pick it up, another one comes into the V, this one goes down, you pick up, this one comes into the V and goes in, you can do that. So depending on what you're trying to do with it, that might be a pretty good, pretty easy robot. So we'll try something like that, some type of arm thing. Intaking, the other thing I think about with this, I always look, by the way, I always look for other games for inspiration. 2017, Steamworks, for their first robotics competition, they had like these gears, right? I wish I had a runner. I could send someone to my office to go grab one of these gears. But they had these gears, which were just big and flat, and a lot of people did like floor intakes, right? And so I actually think that, now that was, you can only carry one at a time. So,
yeah, so you did a
so it was like an into
claw.
like a grip, and then you you scored that. But I almost wonder, one of the really popular ways, there were 2 really popular ways to do it. One was you do a scupula, right, where you just have like a piece of Lexan on the bottom, and then some sort of like roller on a pivot, so it kind of slurps it in there, and then you can do stuff with it. But the one I'm actually thinking about is like a pasta roller. My team at the time, we did a thing with like a multi-wheel setup. Oh look, I have a gear being delivered to me. You could just throw it. Yeah, there we go. Delivery. This is great. So thanks, Emily.
No problem.
So you had these gears in 2017 where you like gripped onto them and you had to score them. This and this, like, I don't know why my brain thinks they're very similar, but I think from a robot's brain they probably are. So by the way, this is another great game piece. This is probably another one of my favorite game pieces. So we'll put that over there. No more kudos to Andy Mark. This is another great Andy Mark game piece. So the one that we did was like a pizza roller, where you had like a series of rollers, where like this one was all about kind of bringing the disc, the gear in, right? And then it moved to the back, and this roller in the back is spinning really, really, really fast. So like this one goes in, this roller hits this one, and that would pop this disc up, and then it would live in between these two. And then we had this whole thing in a pivot, right? So then you could do something to it and then spit it out. But I almost wonder if we could adapt this where you have like a front roller, like the height of this, and then maybe one in the back and another one, and then some sort of like conveyor belty thing.
Yeah.
Pardon my drawing. So then now this is the floor. So the ring comes in, this one pulls it in, pops it up into this area. We can take advantage of the fact that this is squishy and compliant, and you just kind of slurp it, right?
Yeah.
I love this because with intakes, my go-to is always touch it, own it,
Yeah.
right? Like I want to be able to like go like and own this thing. And so maybe we try something like this. This is pretty complicated, so I'm not sure we're going to get this done, but we can at least maybe do parts of this where we'll have like a top roller and a back roller and see if we can slurp them in and pop them up, right? Because if we can slurp them in and pop them up, where they go after that, we can do that.
We can see what's going on there.
All right, so we'll do that.
And then
Conveyor indexer. I mean, we have two easy options here.
I think there's really two major ways of doing it, honestly.
Okay, what are the two, Max? So,
so
make sure we're in sync, right?
Yeah. So the one that I like to see is this happens a lot of times in First Global, right?
Okay.
It's like when you're limited, like for the First Global program, they all have to use it's a purely Rev kit. It's all Rev stuff.
Yep.
So we know that we have the things here, and what they like to do is you'll take the pulleys with the poly belt and the barbs, and be able to push that on one side, and then have like a flat plane on the back to be able to provide that pressure to be able to help move something along.
So let's draw what Mac is talking about here. So you'd have like a wall, right? So this could be like plastic or Coroplast or Lexan or something.
Yeah.
And then you have like a row of rollers with like belt, right? And so the belt that Rev sells is this stuff called polycord, and it's a urethane, it's rubber, you kind of join it yourself. I don't know a good way we don't have any in here right now, but you can basically make belt loops. So if I took this thing a little bit more like orthographic, right, like you could do something where you have like, some number of these things with a back plane, and then we could maybe play with pitching this angle a little bit and see how effective this is at different angles. Right? So this is not bad. This is a pretty easy conveyor.
Yeah, and like the one nice thing about that is legitimately with a couple of pieces of extrusion, you can whip that up. You don't even need to cut things down to size, right? You get a couple pieces of extrusion, you kind of move things around. You might need to cut the polycord to just do your test really quick, but it's relatively cheap to be able to do that play test. So
okay, so we can do this. This is good. The other one that I wonder about is, so if going back to our shooters, what we've been thinking about with shooters is really shooting on the edge, right? So like, really putting velocity right on the edge of this disc. So if we this is just purely from a packaging perspective, right? If you have a conveyor belt like this and a conveyor belt like this, right? And you're able to put a ring like in between these, right? You rotate this one, and you rotate these opposite, and then that ring can go that way, right? And then you've kind of got complete control. I guess this probably also works. The same thing would be like if you only had, I'm going to run out of space here. If you only had one loop of this stuff and like a hard wall,
yeah, you might be able to accomplish the same thing depending on.
You might be able to do the same thing. But when you do it like this guy has to rotate, right? This ring has to rotate as you go up. So depending on the distortion of this ring, right? Yeah. If it is not perfectly round, you might have issues here, but this might be better. So maybe we can obviously, if we can build this one, we can build this one. Right? You just take it off and put a wall there. Okay, so we're going to look at some things like that.
And then that kind of hits.
I think that's it. I mean,
most of them.
This is like, it's getting to like 4:30 here.
We have some work to do.
We have some work to do to build some of this stuff. But I think before we go, let's talk about drivetrains for a second.
Yeah, actually.
Because
speaking of
drivetrains, look, FTC robots are iterative. right? Like you're going to change your mind left and right. All right. I don't know what the right camera view is here. Oh, there we go. That's perfect. Get rid of my doodles for now. All right. So this is our new Ftc Starter Kit Drivetrain. So anybody who bought one of our Ftc Starter Kits from the storefront, the instructions for this
Exist in our documents.
are online.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that was a shaft collar that wasn't tightened. But you get this. So this is a really nice 6-wheel drive chassis with a nice opening in the front. This is going to work. This will work great for the game.
Mm-hmm.
This will give you pretty good flexibility. We like the Omni wheels in the back for this.
It allows you to do a little bit more pivots. So you're able
tighter
to turn a little bit
turns,
easier.
and then you also have your axis of rotation somewhere in here. So if we were to intake or build an intake or a shooter or something like this, pretty much works out of the box, right? And if you go back to what our autonomous strategy is, which
Which was shoot 3, identify.
So you're shooting, autonomously. You're shooting 3, right? Stationary. You haven't driven yet, right? Then you're driving forward and you're detecting, or you're detecting from where you are. You haven't driven yet. This thing is attached somewhere, right? Or just hanging out, right? Then you drive forward, and all of those goal places for these are relative position, right? So this will be fine, right? It's not a game where you have like 12 positions that you need to go all the way around with. Okay, but that being said, one of the things I will say is in every shooting game you want to be able to aim, right? And especially at traditional events, maybe not so much for remote events, being able to strafe around people, being able to move. Look, we know that FTC teams love the Mccann's. So we have 2 things that we're happy to announce today. The first one is today we released our Mccann Chassis Kit, right? Which is this guy. So this Mccann chassis looks really similar to that FTC Starter Kit. Comes with the extra motors, everything you need to do it. This also has a step-by-step instruction guide on how to put this together. And so if you haven't bought an FTC Starter Kit yet, or you haven't bought your build materials yet, for less than $400, you can get a completely running, ready to roll chassis that gives you Mccann. One of the nice things, we released these Mccann wheels last year, and these were 75 millimeters. And people were asking, well, how come you did 75 millimeter wheels instead of the 100 millimeter or 4-inch wheels like everybody else? And part of our answer is that there were 2 things. One is there's a relationship of how smooth the Mccann wheel is based on its diameter to the number of rollers. And so our wheels are smoother than anybody else's that are out on the market because we have more rollers in a smaller package, right? They're also full ball bearing rollers, so they can take the weight of a full robot. The other nice thing is that it brings your center of gravity slightly further down. Flat field this year, right? Nothing to climb over except for maybe these. You want your center of gravity as low as you possibly can, so this thing's going to play pretty darn cool for that. So I think for an advanced team for the flexibility, I think I would go Mccann, right? That's a pretty standard stock thing. There's nothing in this game that would make me feel that Mccann would not be a good advantage. But I will also say that just the regular kind of 6-wheel drive is probably going to play better in this year's game than it has in the past several games. Because I think your cycles are probably going to be more of a straight line. I mean, we need to do some experimenting on how these roll back onto the field, but I think that they're going to be pretty good. So now we are not building a robot, right? We feel very strongly that while we support teams and robot in a weekend and robot in 30 hours, and if as a team you really want to challenge yourself to build that robot in a really short period of time, love that initiative. But especially as a company that provides parts, we really feel like it's really responsible just to give you some prototypes without the system integration, just so that we get your brains kind of thinking about things. We don't want to say, hey, build this, here's a complete list of parts, you can CAD this and you can do this whole thing. So we're not doing that. So for a lot of our thinking and maybe some of our design thinking or strategy analysis that's going to come between now and towards tomorrow and early part of next week, we'll probably make some assumptions that we're using the Mccann. I think we'll probably do some testing about driving over these rings with Mccann wheels or with traction wheels. We also have some competitor wheels and things like that, other companies' wheels that we can try. So we'll do some testing, but I think that this feels like a year where either your standard 6-wheel drive or Mccann, they're both going to be really good drivetrains for this year.
And a lot of it actually might come down to how many motors you need for other operations too,
Yep.
right? Like if you're realistically looking at, you don't need the extra power to push people around or anything along those lines, and you need, like if we're just sitting there specking out, you need 2 for a shooter, 1 for an indexer.
What I was even going to say is if you're trying to make that long 12-foot shot, or let's go even further, let's say you get into some crazy time during teleop where you want to shoot catty corner on the field.
Yep.
Right. You don't know where those discs are going to be in that open fire zone. You've got computer vision. You might be able to do that cross court shot. You might need 2 motors. You might need 3 motors for a shooter. I mean, all the FRC teams that are shooting balls this year, they are all using multiple 400 watt plus motors to shoot those balls, because it takes a lot of energy to move something substantial. So we'll do some testing and see, but it might be a thing where you need those extra motors in your shooter to do those long shots, and then your team will have to decide independently, is it more important to have the maneuverability of a Mccann, or do you want to take those long shots? So I think it's probably a coin flip. We'll have both solutions for you. So and then the other thing about these solutions, which I guess is another good point without getting too sales pitchy, if you got a starter kit, right, from the storefront, all you need to upgrade the starter kit to a Mccann chassis is the 2 additional motors and the wheels.
Like that's it.
That's it, right? Everything else is in the starter kit as is. So like, it's really easy if you've got a starter kit, build that chassis or the 6-wheel drive chassis and
see how it performs.
And then bolting on 2 extra motors and wheels is, you can get that done in 1 session.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it's not going to take that long.
Also, the other side of that is converting this to a 6-wheel drive chassis is also
fairly easy.
Really easy, because if you look at it, the central shaft where this motor is, this motor uses a belt or a chain to power the front wheel inside this channel section. I'll try to get to a picture here. So this is either a chain or a belt, depending on which version you want to build. We have both available. If you wanted to convert this back to a 6-wheel drive, you take these wheels off, 1 wheel goes right on that shaft, 1 wheel is where that shaft is, and 1 wheel is this is, and you can either take this motor off and just put a shaft there or not, and then you can add a chain run or a belt run between these 2. Yep. This chassis is set up that there's actually perfect center-to-center distances of belts. So not all pitches work in our system, but there is an exact belt combination that works here with no tensioners. So
makes that a little easy.
It makes that really easy. Let's check back in with the chat, and then we'll wrap up and start building.
Yeah, it looks like, so it looks like at least with, is basically one person is pointing out, like with the shooting force, that there is a shooting force test that can be put in, so making sure that you don't shoot too far.
Okay.
So we're definitely going to need to take that into account when we're kind of getting things put together. And there are some questions that are mainly around parking. And seeing if you're able to drop the wobble goal in all 3 locations at the same time. But mainly you can only drop it in 1. It's scored at the end of your autonomous round. So it's going to be in one of those 3.
But what if like it's on, like, the squares have overlapping corners, right?
I believe it has to be fully contained within
fully contained, okay.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of that where you need to figure out where the ideal placement is. And I know that there is also a lot of definitions around what's considered supporting and not supporting and other things.
Look, we can't answer those. Like, I mean, the grasp, grapple, attach, supporting. There, I suspect that there will be like lots and lots of. I'm gonna let that balance over there. Perfect. Like there'll be lots and lots of little like scenario questions that happen throughout the season.
Yeah, like they literally have a document at the end of it where they're talking about like here's 30 different ways of the ring. That's not
we're not going to make those calls, right? Like we're going to assume that an average spectator from 6 feet away can determine what's good and not, and we're going to focus on the engineering side of things. So what you can or can't do. So like if we can shoot a shot, right, we're going to figure out if you can throw these rings a certain distance. We're going to figure out some of that. We're not going to tell you whether you can shoot at your favorite referee on the side of the field. Like we're not going to make that call, right? Obviously you can't do that, but
I wouldn't do that.
I would not fire rings at referees. That is not.
But anyway,